Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Today's podcast, I'd like to introduce the importance of humor and fun and openness in the workplace in order to improve productivity, innovation, and creativity. This Workology podcast is sponsored by Clear Company. Now, we can train our management staff and leadership to coach and about HR compliance, but when it comes to motivating and engaging our workforce, we might be missing out on the opportunity not only to find humor, but maybe a little brevity in the workplace and see where it leads us. I'm joined today by Julie Ann Sullivan. She's a speaker, workshop leader, podcaster, culture consultant, and author of Blueprint for Employee Engagement, 37 Essential Elements to Influence, Innovate, and Inspire. Her latest book, Catalysts of Culture, How Visionary Leaders Activate the Employee Experience, is based on her research, experience, and interviews on her podcast, which is called Businesses That Care. Julie Ann, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Thanks very much, Jessica, for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
So I mentioned the topic of conversation today is humor in the workplace. As HR leaders, we're always looking for tools and resources for our managers and team leaders to help them support teams throughout the organization. When it comes to humor, some think that you have a sense of humor or you don't. What's your stance on this?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I also happen to be a certified laughter leader and trainer. And humor is one of those things we talk about quite a bit because humor is different for everyone, right? What one person thinks is funny, another person doesn't think it's funny. And in our era of diversity and inclusion, we have to think about that when we're thinking about humor in the workplace, right? You can have videos on a TV about, some people like videos where people crash, right? Like they're riding on a skateboard and they land on a bar or something. And some people think that's really funny. And then there's people like me who don't think that's funny at all because I don't like to I don't like to see people hurt themselves. So I think when you approach humor in a workplace, you also have to be thinking of all the other areas that you would normally think about in culture. And that is, are we making sure that we are not offending anyone? And, what does that mean? So I think people have to move forward with humor in the workplace and attach it more to fun than jokes. Like jokes just get us in trouble.
Yes, I think as every HR leader is probably nodding their head and thinking about employee investigations that resulted
right.
from someone thinking they were being funny, making a joke, and not thinking about that sensitivity issue that you mentioned.
Exactly. So again, I think that they can talk in humor in conjunction with how to have fun in the office. Because when people have fun, they're joyous. And I think maybe we need to move away from the word humor and really move towards fun and what makes people have a good time and feel joyful.
Do you think you can teach that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the research shows you can actually teach people how to be more optimistic. So it's like anything else in life. If people are willing to learn, right? So that's the key. You can't make anybody learn anything. I think you can teach most any kind of skill. And let's say we were talking before, Jessica, and you said you're an introvert. That's the kind of, that's who you are. But that doesn't mean you can't be more extroverted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're probably not going to ever be that gregarious, hey, it's Jessica Miller-Merrill here, and that's fine. Everybody's different. But like you said, one of the reasons, you do the podcast is it it builds your skill of communicating with others. So I think the same way of teaching people to have fun and that it's okay to have fun can be taught. A lot of times in business, what happens is people are used to being in environments where they're taught to not have fun. And I can give you the perfect example. So in my prior life, I was an accountant, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I know people are like, you? Not possible. Anyway, I had a tax partner look me in the eye once and say, you're obviously not working hard enough because you're having too much fun. And I think a lot of cultures are like that. Uh, People are just looked at, if you're having fun, you're not working. And when you get used to that lifestyle in a culture or workplace, then you forget how to have fun and work. Where the research shows just the opposite, that if people feel freer and able to have fun at work, they're actually more productive and more creative, certainly.
And I think we need, well, I think we need, but I know we need a lot more creativity and innovation in our businesses. And that's why we are thinking about humor and fun, because we need those things desperately to be able to stay ahead in this crazy competitive marketplace.
Absolutely. And there is a ton of research out there where, it started with having a ping pong table or whatever, in a workplace, but the idea was that people needed to take a break. Right? The best ideas come when people are in the shower, driving down the road, when they first wake up in the morning. And the reason for that is there's only so much space in your brain. When you're sitting at your desk and really trying to work on something, sometimes that's really difficult because your brain is clogged with all the old ideas that haven't really filtered out yet, and it's hard to see a new path. This is the whole idea of having collaborative spaces in offices where people can just throw out ideas, no matter how ridiculous they may seem, because there might be a little piece of it while you're laughing at Steve or Andrea's idea, right? You might also say, there's one piece of that would really work in this project that we're working on. So being able to throw out what we think are ridiculous ideas, maybe the total of that idea wouldn't work, but it doesn't mean a piece of it wouldn't work. But people have to feel comfortable, right? One of the key elements I find in good cultures is a safe environment, and that's as much emotional as it is physical, right? People have to feel comfortable that they can throw out an idea that may not work so that they can throw out another idea that might work.
It's funny that we're talking about creativity and innovation, and it's funny also as a pun, because this is a podcast is talking about humor, but I just finished a workshop today here in Austin that we facilitated on artificial intelligence and HR's readiness. And while the presentation, the workshop was about AI for HR, we used a lot of these innovative idea, sort of design thinking framework pieces to help us come up with creative ideas and thoughts around how we might apply and use AI in our workplaces. So I think that having a creative or open space, like you're talking about, to be able to throw out ideas, regardless of how crazy or wacky or ridiculous they are, it makes way for more ideas. And those are the ones that might be the next big thing that's going to really change your business.
And if you look at, other businesses, that's how they came up with that. Here's my philosophy. Too many businesses are so stuck on, ooh, that won't work. But if it's not going to ruin the reputation of your business, okay, throwing those ideas to the side that would, I suggest people try things. Give it 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and see if it works. And if it doesn't, so what? One of the people I interviewed said, if you don't have any bad ideas, you don't have enough ideas. And this is a place that has one of the best workplaces in the accounting and finance industry. It just so happens to be. But I really believe that. We've got to have that. I interviewed the CEO of WD-40, which is a company based on failure, because that stands for water displacement 40th formula. Well, if they had stopped at the first formula that didn't work, they wouldn't be a company, right? So they just kept trying things and throwing things out there. And no matter how bizarre it sounded, they tried it out. And the 40th time it worked. I think there's a great fear in trying something that's not already proven to work. And that is a very stifling mindset in all parts of business, whether it's a new product or how you're going to build your culture or how you're going to pick your next software or how you feel about AI. You know, AI is kind of like the new culture, right? It's too late to say culture isn't important. Like, it's not an add-on, it's a must. And in the years coming, AI is going to be a part of your business in some way. So you can stand in the back and say, nope, that's not for me. I'm not going to do anything. Nope, I'm not going to. But, you know, in 5 to 10 years, you're not going to have that choice.
I love how we started with humor and we have went a completely different place. But I do want to talk about failure a little bit more because
That's a good place for humor.
absolutely, like learning and having a little, just being okay with not coming out winning all the time. It's like learning. Like I have a 10-year-old daughter and she's in swimming and we are on a swim team and she's new to swimming and she's had a couple swim meets. But my focus and with the advice I've given her, and I think we need to remind ourselves, is it's not about winning. It's about learning and working towards this continuous improvement and understanding that it's a marathon and not a sprint. You just don't wake up and become a great swimmer, just like your organization doesn't just wake up and have a really great idea that's going to transform your business. It takes time.
Right. Everything takes time. And by the end of whatever you think that journey is going to be, you're on a new journey. So it's just forever. You know, a lot of companies are coming forward and going, hey, let's have a great culture and we'll do this for 3 months. No, that's not exactly the way you do it. Just like you can have a product, which will carry you so far, and then you have to have the next invention of that. To take it further. But I can give you another example from accounting. So I worked in a great accounting firm in California when I lived there. I worked my hardest and I also had the most fun. It was a great office. And every year we would have at least one tax return that we did wrong like 10 times. And it was usually one of the simplest returns, but because it was so simple, we didn't pay enough attention, right? And so we put them up on a wall where our clients never went, like our break room. And we would just put this return up every time we had to do it, just so we could laugh at ourselves, but also to remember to pay attention to the little ones, right? And so in that way, we were using humor of ourselves to learn to not make that same mistake over and over again. And I think that's really important in business. You try some things and you have those duh moments. Why didn't we think of that in the very beginning? And I think we have to say that to ourselves. What were we thinking? Why didn't we think of this piece that we now see as necessary to carry this program forward, whatever that may be? And I think we need to take a moment and go, you know, where were we? And laugh about it and move forward, as opposed to, wow, we were so stupid and, you know, we've got a problem internally. You see what I'm saying? You can make it an angst or you can laugh at yourself and learn and move forward. And I think that's a great way to use humor in a business.
Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast sponsored by Clear Company. Today we are talking about a lot of different things with Julie Ann Sullivan. She's a culture coach and author. We're talking about human in the workplace, but we're going lots of different places.
This episode has been sponsored by Clear Company, a complete talent management software provider. Clear Company's software solutions include award-winning applicant tracking, onboarding, and performance management solutions. Hire, retain, and engage more top talent with Clear Company.
I'm excited to get back into the conversation. This is a fun one. Well, let's take a step back and maybe talk about your background. I want to know, and I hope that others do here, why did you start writing books? Like, what led you to writing books on workplace culture and employee experience? Because you just told me you were an accountant. How did this happen?
Well, I started out with a bachelor's degree in psychology. And when I was 18 years old, I decided I would deliberately learn something about human behavior, either my behavior or others, every single day. And I've continued that for decades. So I have a vast knowledge of human behavior, how people act, how they react, what some of those reasons are. And then I went into accounting and learned the functionalities of many different kinds of businesses. When I didn't want to learn one more thing about accounting, I knew I had to leave my job. I was working for someone who is a continued friend of mine. And I said, I got to get out of here because I don't want to learn anymore. And to me, that's a death sentence in that you've always got to keep learning to be really good at whatever you do. So I left and I decided I wanted to become a professional speaker because I had spoken in the past and I was looking through a fuzzy file, as I call it, that I have of nice letters that people wrote to me about presentations that I did. I had no idea what that meant to be a professional speaker, but decided to do that. And as I was going down that path, I started out talking about communication, collaboration, and change. I realized I had a very unique perspective on business because I understood people and I understood how businesses work. So over the years, I kind of melded them together, started talking about employee engagement. Again, 9, 10 years ago, I started, getting Google alerts on this and reading and doing research. And when I wrote the book Blueprint for Employee Engagement, it was because I realized that the subject was overwhelming. And if they hadn't thought about it 10 years ago, by this time, it was crazy. And I knew from my research and work in the change arena that the number one reason people don't change, besides not getting enough information, is the idea is too big. So the Blueprint for Employee Engagement was a way to cut it down into bite-sized pieces. As I say to people, there's 37 chapters in there. They're all on different elements. You could spend 1 month on each of those chapters, and you would have 37 months of culture work if that's what you wanted to do. Now, the Catalyst of Culture book I wrote because it was a way, one, to get more people to realize these brilliant people that I've interviewed on my podcast. And it was very hard to pick 14. But after interviewing 50 of them, I realized that there were 4 key elements that they all had. And that was listening, creating a safe environment, lifelong learning, and I am completely going to forget what the O is, but it'll come back to me. And so I wanted to share that with people. So again, if they wanted a path to take to create a great culture for themselves, they would have a place to start, because that's always the issue. Where do I begin, right? So the books were really giving people pathways, and that's what it was all about.
I love it. I feel like
And I figured out it's being open to new ideas. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So let's go back. So
Listening is the number one.
listening, number
Which
one.
was great because I did a lot of work in communication, so I know all about listening. The second one is being open to new ideas, and that means being open to new ideas outside of yourself. The third one is lifelong learning, not only for the CEO, but everyone in the company, because as people grow, business grows. And the fourth one was creating a safe environment. And as this next generation comes through, they're going to demand a safe environment. That's going to be their big demand because they've grown up with the Me Too movement and way too many mass shootings. So that's going to be what's important to them. Just like for millennials, it was, I want you to care about me.
I feel like you've described all the life lessons, like the 4 priorities that you need to be great or really make a impact in your family, friends, and your organization. Like, done.
Yeah.
These are the 4 things. Because I was going to say that I feel like this conversation is not about humor at all. It's about your 4 things, but most importantly, being open with the O. Like, open to all the other things, open to different people, open to learning, open to building relationships. All these things are critical in just being a really great human being.
Yeah, being open to ideas that aren't yours, right? We all could use a good dose of growing in respect for other people's ideas, opinions, backgrounds, stories. We're all on the same planet.
So let's say we're working with a group of managers or we're coaching some managers. How do we help guide them in that direction?
Well, many of what I talk about has got to come from the top down. But a lot of times I talk to people who don't have that kind of power. I'll use that word. And so what I suggest is when I talk about engagement, it starts with the individual. So if you can't make changes for an entire workplace, you can make a change in yourself that affects everyone that you come into contact with, whether that be colleagues or customers. And I always say you have to live with you first, right? So you can be more positive, you can listen more, you can be more open to what someone is saying to you, right? You're working with a colleague on a project. You can be more open when somebody gives you an idea that you never thought of instead of closing it off and saying, you don't know what you're talking about, that won't work, right? Some people, that's the way they react. So you could be more open. You can keep learning about what you're doing or anything, by the way. I just finished FBI Citizens Academy, which has nothing to do with my work, but it has everything to do with my work. I will tell you that. And that safe environment is, if you're a manager, do your people feel like they can come talk to you? Because if they don't, you're missing out on a lot of creativity, innovation, and productivity. Because when people are in an environment where they feel stifled, even to have a conversation with their manager, then they get stifled in other ways. And let me give your listeners an idea that I used with the company. And it's one of those duh moments. But I sat down with a group of managers, a leadership team, and I made a matrix. Do you like to be communicated with by phone, in person, email, text? And we made a matrix like that. And we had every leader fill out 1, 2, 3, 4 what their preferences were. In that small management team, there's only about 8 people. They had no idea that so-and-so liked people to come to their door. nobody came to them because they didn't want to bother them. And yet they weren't reading their emails because they don't have time to do that all day. So just that little bit of information made everything, the whole office, more productive. So there's a simple idea that everybody could do that would make their world, what surrounds them, work better. And then hopefully, other departments will pick up on that. Wow, it's working over here. Maybe it'll work over there, depending upon how their business is set up, how big it is.
It opens up conversation to other areas. Like once you identify, like you said with this matrix, oh, this person prefers face-to-face conversations or they prefer text, you're kind of meeting them on their level, right?
Exactly.
And then more collaboration or communication can happen differently.
And funny enough, I'll use the word funny, because when we posted this, everybody was laughing because they didn't have any idea. And these people had been together for years. And they were reacting and acting towards one another in what they thought was the best way. Nobody ever asked.
I want to do this matrix with my family.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm visiting my sisters and my mom this week, and I think that it will be very interesting. It could be better than therapy.
And cheaper.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I want to take a step back. What made you want to take this FBI class? Do you have, is learning in your top 4 in your Strengths Finder or your top 5? Do you know?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Because I'm a sponge.
Interesting. It just feels like you've been like me, like this isn't uncommon, I think, for entrepreneurs. Like they kind of just love information and resources and absorbing everything that they can. But what led you to taking this class?
Well, actually, I did a workshop for a chapter of the Women's President organization. And one of the women in that group, we met later to talk about some business topics. And she had gone through this course. And she was telling me about it. And honestly, the first thing I thought of is, wow, I would never do anything like that. So I want to do that. And so she said, well, you have to be nominated and you'll have to contact me in January. And I went home and put it on my calendar because I'd never remember. So I called her and I got nominated and I got in, and it was mind expanding. And we just took a trip, some of us. Part of being a graduate of that program is you get to go to Washington, D.C. for a trip. And part of that trip is to spend a day at Quantico.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah, that was like Disneyland.
Wow. This is just fascinates me. I mean, I'm a learner, and so I'm always doing crazy things. Like that's why
we can talk. You can probably do it in your town.
Oh, interesting. No, I would like, let's talk after this podcast more, just in general, because I'm always looking for new stuff. Well, so I want to ask for those that are interested in the books and learning more about what you do in your podcast, can you give us kind of the skinny on where to go to get all that information?
Sure. You can go to Amazon to get both those books. And if you can't remember them, just look up Julianne Sullivan. My website's juliannesullivan.com. You can find Businesses That Care podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you listen to it somewhere that you don't find it, let me know and I'll get it there. I met somebody in an airport once and they said, is it on Spotify? This is about 6 months ago. And I went, no, but it should be. So it is now. But, things keep changing. So you put in Julianne Sullivan in Google and you will find me. There is no way you cannot find me.
That is also the reason that I stay hyphenated, because it's Julianne Sullivan, easy name to Google and be directed to you and only you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll link to both the books and the podcast, and then also your LinkedIn and your Twitter in the transcript of this podcast. So to make it easier for everyone, too, you can just go to workology.com and type in Julianne Sullivan, and you'll be connected to this transcript with all the resources that we talked about, because we talked about a lot today.
For starting out on humor, we're like all over it, but it's all related. I think that's really the message, right? This is all related. Our lives aren't really cut up into little sections. They all bleed into one another and make us the human that we are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Julianne, for taking the time to talk with us today on the podcast.
Thank you, Jessica. I had a great time.
This has been a fascinating discussion, and I think we've learned a lot about leadership, humor, openness, engagement, listening, and all the things. Like just really being open to learning and how to help make a dent in your organization and really move the needle forward. There are so many ways that being open and just interested and having humor and being creative and innovative can have on not just employee engagement, but the larger business and creativity in the workplace. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to talk with Julianne and her extensive experience working with companies on maintaining a culture of employee engagement. I'm also interested to try to get myself maybe in this FBI training program that she mentioned. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast, sponsored by Clear Company. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, you can visit workology.com to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.